Have you ever felt like you're still living in your mother's shadow, even when she's not around? Like there's a voice inside you that says, "Don't disappoint her. Stay small. Be good." And it echoes in your decisions, your relationships, your silence. If you've ever wrestled with guilt for wanting something different from what your family expected, if part of you feels trapped in a role that doesn't fit anymore, then this journey is for you. In this video, we're not going to blame. We're going to see. We'll walk through the most hidden corridors of your psyche, where Carl Jung's wisdom illuminates the way. Where the mother is not just a person, but a powerful archetype buried in your emotional DNA. And where true freedom begins, not with forgiveness, but with a single act of courage, facing the mother within. I still remember a moment from years ago. I was about to take a big leap in my life. I'd packed my bags, made my decision. But the night before I left, I heard her voice, not my real mother, but the one inside me. And she said, "What if you're making a mistake?" That whisper almost made me stay, but I didn't. And today, I want to walk beside you as you take your step too. So if any part of this feels like your story, comment below. I choose myself. Like, share, and subscribe if you're ready to rewrite your inner myth, because your story isn't over. It's just beginning. You've moved cities, changed your name, started a new chapter, and yet, in quiet moments, her voice still echoes. Are you sure that's a good idea? Don't forget who raised you. I only want what's best. She doesn't have to be there physically because she's already inside. This is the mother complex. And until you see it, name it, and face it, you will keep mistaking her voice for your own. Carl Jung warned us, the greatest psychological influence is not what our parents did, but what they didn't live. The unlived lives, the silent sorrows, the dreams buried under sacrifice. When a mother cannot process her own grief, her child absorbs it. Not consciously, but energetically. The child becomes the container. And then, without knowing it, the adult becomes the echo. You find yourself holding back. Not because you're unsure, but because a voice inside whispers, "This isn't safe." You choose partners that feel familiar. Not because they love you well, but because their distance feels like home. You shrink in moments of power, soften your truth, delay your dreams. Not because you lack courage, but because something in you still asks, will she approve? This is not weakness. This is programming. And it began before you even had words. The mother complex lives in your nervous system. It hides in your loyalty, in your guilt, in your fear of being selfish. It shows up when you try to choose yourself and feel like a traitor. But here's the truth. You are not betraying her by becoming yourself. You are honoring the part of her that never got to. You are finishing what she couldn't begin. And maybe, just maybe, freeing both of you. So pause for a moment. Breathe. Ask yourself, is the life I'm living mine? Or is it the one she dreamed for me? Only when we ask that question do we begin to reclaim our own voice. If this part of the journey resonates with you, comment below. I'm ready to reclaim my story. And share this video with someone who may be carrying a voice that was never theirs to begin with. The woman who gave you life is not the only mother you carry. In Jungian psychology, the mother is not just a person. She is a force, a blueprint. She lives in myth, in dreams, in symbols passed down through generations. She's both your memory and your inheritance. This is the archetypal mother, ancient, timeless, and deeply embedded in the collective unconscious. And she doesn't disappear just because your mother is no longer physically present. She lives beneath that identity, shaping how you relate, how you love, how you leave. There's a reason certain relationships feel like home, even when they hurt. A reason you long for nurturing and fear closeness in the same breath. Because the archetype is not just warm and life-giving. She's also the devourer, the smotherer, the silent ruler of your inner world. Jung called this the paradox of the Great Mother. She is both the womb and the cage. She births, and she consumes. And when the psyche confuses the personal mother with this archetypal force, we get lost in a labyrinth. We begin reenacting old wounds in new relationships, casting our inner pain onto lovers, friends, mentors, anyone who carries that symbolic weight. We don't see them clearly. We see them through the eyes of the wounded child. You might think you're reacting to your boss, your partner, your friend. But in truth, you're responding to your mother's silence, her anger, her absence echoes embedded in your emotional DNA. And here's what makes it more complex. The archetypal mother doesn't always come as a woman. She appears as culture, as religion, as nature, as any force that holds, nourishes, demands, and defines. That's why the pain feels so vast, so ancient. Because it is. It's not just personal, it's collective. It's not just your story, it's humanity's story. And when you start to see her not as one woman, but as a symbol, something begins to shift. You stop blaming. You start integrating. You realize, my pain is real, but it's also archetypal. And that realization gives you distance. And from that distance comes choice. You no longer have to fight her. You can face her. You no longer have to prove your worth. You can begin to believe it. So ask yourself now, who in your life have you expected to mother you? And what if that responsibility was never theirs? If that question stirred something in you, drop a comment below. I see her. Because awareness is the first act of healing. Love, when distorted, can become a prison, especially when it comes from the figure we are told to revere the most, the mother. What if the love you received came wrapped in control? What if the care was conditional, and the warmth had sharp edges? This is the face of the shadow mother, not the gentle nurturer, not the image celebrated on holidays and in stories, but the psychic imprint left by unmet needs, emotional manipulation, and invisible contracts you never agreed to. She doesn't yell. She whispers, "After all I did for you, you're hurting me by pulling away. I only want what's best." These phrases sound innocent, but to the child within you, they are chains. Jung observed that the shadow mother emerges when maternal energy overreaches its bounds, when care becomes control, when love becomes surveillance, when devotion disguises possession. In childhood, this may have looked like excessive protection, constant worry, or subtle disapproval whenever you showed independence. You learned to read her mood before your own. You learned to anticipate her needs before you even knew yours. And now, as an adult, you still hesitate. You feel guilty when you say no, anxious when you succeed, ashamed when you prioritize yourself. Because deep down, the message you internalized was this: my freedom is betrayal. And that belief is not a flaw. It's a survival strategy. You didn't choose it, but now you can begin to unchoose it. Facing the shadow mother is terrifying because she wears the face of love. She says she's protecting you even as she shrinks you. She says she's supporting you even as she keeps you afraid. But here's the truth Jung wanted us to remember. The shadow mother is not evil. She is wounded. And that wound, passed down through generations, has shaped you. But it does not have to define you. She is not just your jailer. She is also the gatekeeper, the one you must face, not to destroy, but to reclaim what she's held hostage: your voice, your fire, your sovereignty. So next time you feel fear when choosing yourself, pause. Ask, who is afraid right now? Is it me or the child still seeking her approval? If you've ever felt that inner pull between your truth and her expectations, drop a comment. I am not what she feared. And let's keep walking this path toward freedom together. There's a voice inside you, and it doesn't sound like yours. It tells you to stay quiet, to tone it down, to not ask for too much. It questions your choices, second-guesses your instincts, shames you when you shine, and mocks you when you stumble. That voice is not random. It's not just self-doubt. It's the echo of the inner mother, the psychological residue of every time your authenticity was met with disapproval. You didn't invent that voice. You inherited it. Jung described this as the mother complex, a network of emotions, memories, and unspoken rules passed down not through DNA, but through daily interaction. Moments when your excitement was met with worry. Your boundaries were met with guilt. Your individuality was met with silence. And what began as adaptation becomes identity. You stop asking, "Is this true?" and start believing, "I must be too much." So when you grow older, the voice doesn't leave. It becomes your inner critic, not because you're broken, but because your psyche still believes obedience equals love. You chase perfection not because you're ambitious, but because it feels safer than being seen as flawed. You over-apologize, not because you're weak, but because somewhere in you, love was once linked to self-erasure. You delay joy not because you're patient, but because guilt whispers, "Have you earned it?" This is the tragic inheritance of unprocessed maternal energy. And no, it's not about blaming your mother. It's about recognizing the voices that were never truly yours, and choosing which ones you'll carry forward. Because here's the quiet truth. You are allowed to speak without fear. You are allowed to choose without apology. You are allowed to live without permission. But first, you must notice. You must ask, whose voice is this? Would I ever speak to a child the way I speak to myself? And when you recognize the echo, you don't silence it with shame. You meet it with compassion. You say, "I hear you. I know where you came from, but I no longer need you to keep me small." That's where healing begins, not by fighting the voice, but by choosing your own. So if this resonates, take a deep breath. And in the comments, write, "I reclaim my voice." Because the first step to freedom is remembering who you were before you who to be. We've been taught that to honor someone, we must never walk away, that love means loyalty, that family means forever, that to separate is to betray. But Carl Jung offered a different perspective. He said true healing begins not with blame, but with separation, and not the kind you can see, not physical distance or silent treatment, but the deeper separation, the psychological act of stepping out of someone else's story and into your own. This is where many get stuck, because separating from the inner mother, the voice, the guilt, the roles you were given, feels like abandoning her, like saying, "You were wrong," but that's not what it is. It's saying, "I can no longer sacrifice myself to keep this dynamic alive." Because healing does not require you to make her the villain. It requires you to make yourself visible. Many people delay this separation for years. They build lives shaped around avoiding disappointment. They tiptoe through their choices, trying not to cause waves. They succeed, but feel hollow. They grow, but feel fake. Because the inner child is still asking, will she approve? Will she be proud? But here's what Jung knew deeply until the adult self steps forward and says, "I choose myself, even if she wouldn't have." There can be no individuation, no sovereignty, no soul. This separation is not an act of rebellion. It's an act of reverence for life, for truth, for growth. It is not about forgetting what she gave. It's about no longer making your worth dependent on her gaze. Yes, it might bring grief. Yes, you may feel guilt. But both are part of the initiation. Because this isn't just a personal decision. It's a sacred threshold. You are not walking away from love. You are walking toward authenticity. And that shift, it doesn't just change your life. It ends cycles. It rewrites legacy. So pause here and ask, what part of me is still living for her approval? What would my life look like if I no longer needed it? If those questions make your chest tighten, you're in the right place. That's where the work begins. In the comments, write, "I choose truth over guilt," because you don't need her permission to become who you are. She lives inside you, not just as a critic or a ghost, but as a force that still shapes your self-worth, your choices, your silence, the inner mother. And here's the part that often gets missed. She doesn't have to remain the tyrant. She can be transformed, because the goal is not to kill her off. It's to reclaim her, to take back the parts of your psyche that once belonged to her voice and reassign them to your own. Jung called this the path of individuation, not just cutting away the past, but integrating it so that what once ruled you now becomes your resource. So how does this happen? First, by seeing her clearly, not as the perfect angel society demands, not as the villain your pain once believed, but as a human being flawed, scared, shaped by her own inner mother. Then, by turning inward, by noticing where her voice speaks through you, when you withhold praise from yourself, when you fear being too much, when you shrink after success, and then speaking back, not with rage, but with truth. You say, "I know you were trying to protect me, but I don't need fear to stay safe anymore." You begin mothering yourself, not with perfection, but with presence. You become the one who soothes your anxiety, the one who celebrates your wins, the one who says, "You are already enough." This isn't about fantasy. It's about inner reprinting. It's about ritual, journaling, symbolic acts, speaking to the mirror, honoring your inner child, and slowly, something shifts. The voice softens. The guilt fades. The silence breaks. You begin to feel what she couldn't offer: warmth, validation, gentleness, space. And from that space, you begin to live, not as a child seeking permission, but as an adult who chooses love that doesn't hurt, boundaries that don't betray, truth that doesn't need to be hidden. So ask yourself now, what would it look like to become the mother I never had? What would I say to myself if I believed I was worthy right now, as I am? If you're ready to begin that conversation, write in the comments, "I choose to mother myself," because the healed inner mother doesn't punish. She empowers. Healing isn't just insight, it's action. And not just the loud, public kind, but sacred, private, symbolic steps that signal to your psyche something has changed. Carl Jung called this active imagination, the conscious dialogue with unconscious forces. It's not fantasy, it's ceremony. It's the soul speaking in images, in symbols, and sacred gestures. Because the mother complex doesn't dissolve through logic. It unbinds through ritual. Think of it like this. Your inner world speaks a different language, not spreadsheets, not bullet points, but fire, water, tears, ink, movement, story. So how do you begin? You write a letter to her, not your real mother, but the inner one. You let the abandoned child speak. You name the pain, the longing, the rage, and then you write back. You let the inner mother respond, not with judgment, but with grief, with truth, with the sorrow of everything she didn't know how to give. You light a candle. You read the letter aloud. You burn it. You bury it. You dance it into the earth. Whatever act feels like closure. Because the psyche needs endings, not just intellectual ones, but visceral ones. Other rituals? Create an altar not of religion, but of sovereignty. Place objects that remind you of your truth. A photo of yourself as a child. A stone you picked up on a hard day. A quote that breaks you open and puts you back together. Each time you pass it, you remember, "I belong to myself." Or stand in front of a mirror and say, "Your story is no longer mine. I honor you, but I return to me." These rituals may seem small, but they echo through the architecture of the unconscious. They mark a threshold. They tell your inner world, the reign of the shadow is over. A new ruler stands here now, not to dominate, but to live with clarity and care. So pause and ask yourself, what ritual does my soul need right now? What symbolic act would let my inner child know we're safe now? If something stirred in you, write in the comments, I mark this threshold. Because healing is not just reflection, it's remembrance. And remembrance requires ritual. There comes a moment when the inner child steps back, and the adult steps forward, not with loud defiance, not with dramatic rejection, but with quiet certainty. This is the birth of sovereignty. You no longer wait for approval. You no longer shrink when challenged. You no longer carry the script that says, be who she needed you to be. You choose. You choose how you speak, how you love, how you rest. You choose based on your inner compass, not the inherited guilt or the myth of the good child. This shift doesn't happen overnight. It unfolds slowly, in choices that feel small but signal something profound. Saying no, even when your heart races. Pursuing joy, even when it feels selfish. Setting boundaries, even when you fear they'll walk away. Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, not who you were taught to be. And at the heart of this process lies a radical truth. You are allowed to be whole, even if they never were. You are allowed to grow, even if it scares them. You are allowed to walk your path, even if it means walking alone for a while. Because the adult doesn't abandon the inner child. She protects her. She advocates for her. She says, we are not going back to silence. And here's what's sacred. You don't need to prove yourself through pain anymore. You don't need to earn rest. You don't need to shrink so others feel big. You were never meant to live your entire life as someone's reflection. You were meant to become your own light. This is sovereignty. Not perfection, not isolation, but inner authorship. You become the one who names, the one who blesses, the one who chooses. So ask yourself now, what decision have I been avoiding because I feared her reaction? What would I do if I no longer needed to be good, just real? If you're ready to take that step, however small, write in the comments, I choose myself, because that choice changes everything. What if your healing is not just for you? What if every time you say no without guilt, every time you speak your truth without shrinking, every time you choose joy over duty, you are breaking a spell that's haunted your family for generations? Carl Jung believed that unresolved wounds are inherited, not just biologically, but psychologically, emotionally, energetically. And unless someone becomes conscious, the pattern repeats. But here you are, asking different questions, making different choices, becoming the one who says, it ends with me. This is the beginning of a new legacy. A legacy where your children, biological or chosen, no longer inherit your silence. Where intimacy is not built on guilt. Where love doesn't come with a cost. Where tenderness is safe. And freedom doesn't feel like betrayal. That's what you're creating. Not just a life, but a lineage. And no, you won't do it perfectly. You will stumble. You will forget. You will still hear her voice some days. But the difference is, now you know. You know how to pause. You know how to come back to yourself. You know how to begin again. This is what it means to live not as a wound, but as a whole. Not as a child surviving, but as an adult creating. Not as someone seeking permission, but as someone rewriting the myth. You are not the echo. You are the voice. You are not the continuation. You are the change. So as this journey comes to a close, ask yourself, what story do I want to pass on? What truth will they remember when they see how I lived? And if that truth is love without sacrifice, presence without fear, freedom without apology, then know this, you are already building a new legacy. If you feel that truth in your bones, comment below. It ends with me. And thank you for being the one who turned pain into purpose and silence into sovereignty.